All right, so now the meeting's officially begun. Hi, my name's Eric. I invited here Drew Penrose to come give a talk to us, mostly because I've seen some really cool maps that Drew's been making about hypothetical multi-member districts in various states, including California. I really want to see how the magic happens. So, Drew, please.
Thanks. And yeah, I didn't prepare any slides or anything. I thought I would, you talked about using this flow that I've developed to draw multi-winner district maps for California state legislature. So I thought I'd run through sort of the first steps of how I do that. But first, I did want to give some background on the Fair Representation Act and why the maps wind up looking the way that they do, and what the whole multi-winner district thing is. I realize folks on the call probably know that, but since it's being recorded, I figure I may as well give a little bit of a nuts and bolts explanation there. So I worked at FairVote from 2012 until about a year ago, 2020, when I left to focus on parenting. But one other thing I did when I left was I talked to Rob Ritchie about what I thought the movement for proportional representation needed. And one of the things I suggested was something sort of like the book Every Vote Equal, which is sort of a all-encompassing book on the national popular vote plan for president. Lays out, the history of the presidency itself, what the Constitution says, prior attempts to amend the Constitution, basically everything you would need to advocate for it. And I said, we need something like that for proportional representation. And the working title, so Rob basically said that he thought it'd be a good idea for me to, start something like that while I was doing part-time work, taking time off for parenting. So the working title I came up with was Our Shared Republic. That's the name of the Twitter account now, and it's gone a lot of different directions. I'm not sure that I would describe what I'm doing now as exactly how I pitched it originally. But one thing I've been doing is trying to get the idea of multi-winner districts just sort of better understood, just trying to make it feel more real to people. And districting is a way of doing that. So I finally took the plunge and learned how to use Dave's Redistricting app, which is a very, very usable tool. It's actually pretty easy to pick up and start using for just about anybody. And yet it's also a very powerful tool. So this free online service that gives everyone the ability to draw their own district maps and to analyze them. It gives them demographic data for the districts they've drawn, partisan data for the districts they've drawn. It's really a very impressive thing that exists out there. And it is not made to draw multi-winner district maps, but I worked out a way where I would be able to do that and started actually streaming myself live over Twitch, which is an online service usually used by people to stream video of themselves playing video games. I thought I would use it to stream districting, drawing Fair Representation Act style maps. And I'm joined sometimes by prior colleagues at FairVote, folks who have gone on to work in the ranked choice voting or democracy space in other ways. And we just sort of have a conversation while I'm doing it. And as of just a couple weeks ago, I've done every state. So the last one was California. And my first California map, I'll actually show my second California map because the first one is in a monochrome format right now, which I'll explain why a little later. Was the last one I did. It's a very complicated state. It took a while. These districts were drawn from scratch and according to the rules in the Fair Representation Act. So with that, what the Fair Representation Act requires is that every state, Fair Representation Act, by the way, is HR 3863, would require that every single state in the country elect its members of the House of Representatives in multi-winner elections with proportional ranked choice voting, what's sometimes called the single transferable vote. That's the form of proportional representation that uses a ranked choice voting ballot. So it's totally candidate-based. You can vote across party lines. You could even use it in nonpartisan elections, and some local places have. So it's kind of uniquely well-suited for the American political culture and American political experience as a form of proportional representation, which most Americans are less familiar with. We have a limited history of using proportional representation in the United States. The model in the Fair Representation Act is that states would divide into districts, electing 3, 4, or 5 members each, and the members would be elected using proportional ranked choice voting in those districts. So really small states don't draw any districts at all. There's a bunch of states, almost half of them, that would be electing 5 or fewer members total, so they would just elect statewide. There's no districting to be done there. Every other state divides into districts, but there are these large regional districts that elect 3, 4, or 5. The Fair Representation Act sets some pretty clear rules on how many districts there will be and what magnitude there will be. So that's what I used for all of my maps. So this is a spreadsheet that I have that, and the spreadsheets that I show, I'd be happy to share with the group afterward. This one just has census information from the 2020 census for all 50 states, how many seats they are going to have in the House of Representatives starting in 2022. Their partisanship. So partisanship is a measure that Fair Vote uses to assess basically how much the state prefers Democrats to Republicans, how blue or red the state is. And it's basically a measure of how much Joe Biden overperformed or underperformed in the 2020 election. So here we can see California. California is 62.5% Democratic, means that Joe Biden did about 12.5 points better than his national average in California. And I use that to assess how good of a job one of my maps does at achieving statewide proportional representation. And then based on that 2020 apportionment, I determine how many districts they'll have and what magnitude they'll have. So the Fair Representation Act creates a preference for 5 winner districts. With proportional representation, you always get closer to a perfect proportionality with a larger district magnitude. But there are trade-offs, particularly in a ranked choice voting system. You could have a very long ballot if you were electing, say, all 52 members of the California congressional delegation statewide. It would be something like 150 to 200 candidates on the ballot, and you'd have the right to rank them. It's probably be a little overwhelming. And you also get trade-offs just in terms of proportionality. So if you look at the curve in terms of how proportional your results are, it gets a lot better when you go to 3 seats, and then 4 seats is significantly better, and then 5 seats is better still, but it flattens off. It flattens off pretty quickly. And so you actually do get pretty good statewide proportional representation, even with 3 winner districts, but especially 5 winner districts, I think do a great job. So the Fair Representation Act sets a cap of 5 winner districts. There's never districts that elect more than that. And it prefers 5 winner districts where possible. However, it also disfavors 4 winner districts. And the reason there is because based on the way the threshold works, so under proportional ranked choice voting, it's a single vote system. So each candidate is winning with their own share of votes. And if you run the analysis in a 2-party system, basically you could have a district that's like 55, 56% for one party, which would be a safe district for that party in a single winner district system, and it would split 2-2. 4 winner districts go 2-2 quite easily. And there was some concern when they were developing the Fair Representation Act that would be seen as unfair. If you have an area where a majority clearly favors one party, yet they're split evenly, that's seen as a violation of the principle of proportional representation. So that's why you'll see very few 4 winner districts. And conversely, that's also why you'll see a lot of 3 winner districts, because if you disfavor 4 winner districts, what you're going to wind up with is a formula that says, well, draw as many 5 winner districts as you can, but you have to be able to fill in the rest with 3 winner districts. So that's why California, for example, has 8 5 winner districts and 4 3 winner districts. That adds up to the 52 seats that it gets altogether. Under the prior census, it would have had 10 5 winner districts and 1 3 winner district. So you see either way, you're avoiding 4 winner districts. And you can see that in any of the larger states. And it's particularly clear in states that elect 9 members total. So Massachusetts, for example, could be 5-4, but instead it's 3 that each elect 3. And the reason is because we want to avoid that 4 winner district. So those are sort of the district magnitude rules, and I just give that as background for why the districts look the way they do. It's a kind of in the weeds question, but honestly, I think it's the most common question I've gotten after posting many of my maps from people in the States. They really want to know, well, why did you do all of these 3-winner districts? Why is it 5 and 3-winner districts? Shouldn't there just be a 7-winner district or a 9-winner district? Or shouldn't it be 2 4-winner districts or something like that? And these are the rules that are in the Fair Representation Act. I'm not going to defend them too vigorously. I'd actually like to see greater flexibility in district magnitude given to the states under the act, but the rules as they are do make sense. They are intentional, and they were decided based on a certain kind of logic. As you're looking to propose something for the California state legislature, you should probably think through what kind of district magnitude you're thinking about. I don't know if you already have sort of a firm opinion on that, but very rarely will you see proportional ranked choice voting for let's say a national legislature in other countries electing more than 6 or 7 members. And like Ireland uses 3, 4, and 5-winner districts, just like the Fair Representation Act. Malta uses exclusively 5-winner districts. So if you wanted to switch something like the California State House with 80 seats, it would be very easy to say, well, let's do 16 5-winner districts. That would be a simple way to do it. But there are any number of other models you could adopt based on what you think would work best for California. So
I have a few questions about this, I guess, algorithmic apportionment of how many district magnitudes there are. Does it take into account the, I guess, concentrated geography of people? Like if there's huge swaths of relatively low population density land, does it try to make sure there's a 3-winner district to cover that, so it's not an even more large district?
So the question about where the districts will go is definitely not something that they could have put into congressional legislation. It's too complicated a question. I mean, I guess you could have put in something about them trying to make the geographic distribution of districts roughly equal, but basically no. Asterisk, right? Because the Fair Representation Act, what it actually does is it requires every state to adopt an independent redistricting commission and then details how that commission is adopted. It's the exact same rules that you'd find in HR 1, which is essentially not too different from the California Independent Redistricting Commission that you have now. And in fact, it allows states that already have an independent redistricting commission to just use their existing commission. So if the Fair Representation Act passed, your existing independent redistricting commission would be the one tasked with deciding where exactly the 5 and the 3-winner districts would go. So the idea there is that people from California who are going to be holding hearings all around the state would be the ones to make that call. And they would be able to use all sorts of different kinds of evidence in doing that. But probably the most common thing would be rural areas having the 3-winner districts and urban areas having the 5-winner districts. And that's certainly the principle that I used when drawing my sample maps. Are there other questions about that? I think the next thing for me to go into would be the actual flow that I used for drawing the map. So before I do that, I want to make sure that I've cleared any questions on the background here.
It's not really a question, it's more of a comment to the point that was raised. You would like to have the districts be as geographically small as possible, which basically means that you're going to have your rural areas. If you have to have 3-member districts, you're going to put them in the rural areas, because if you put a 5-member district in a rural area, it's going to be a lot larger. So that's why I think your map will show that.
That's right, yeah. And sometimes it can be even more complicated than that. So if you look at the map that I have of California, this district here that's the northern part of the state is pretty big. And in fact, the first map that I did, which it is monochrome, but you'll still be able to see, instead of having a northern district, it puts basically the entirety of rural California into a single 3-winner district. That's taking a little bit of time to load, but it is loading. So let's just give it a second. Yeah, so you can see this big district here covering the entire eastern border of California is a 3-winner district. So saying you want to make the districts as geographically small as possible, you actually wouldn't want to make them exclusively rural. You'd want to have like a blend of rural with some urban in there, because that's how that second map does it. It makes that district a little bit smaller by virtue of having it go all the way to the coast where the population is a little bit denser. It's a very complicated, you know, like drawing districts from scratch. There's just a lot of judgment calls you have to make. And I'm not from California, or, you know, I'm not from most of the states that I was drawing maps from, or so I relied on a feedback from people from those states to tell me if I was doing something kind of nutty. The reason I have this second one is because Matthew Shugart, the political scientist, actually replied to my first one, said, "Oh, it looks okay, but I don't think you should have the district covering the entire border on the east." So that's why I developed this one. Though I've heard from other folks in California, Pedro Hernandez particularly, that he thinks the first map I did was probably a better baseline to start from than this one. Of course, as I always try to say, like, these are just models. Like, I'm not suggesting that this would be the actual district map that California would adopt. That would be up to the folks of California operating through their independent redistricting commission. Any other questions before I move on? Okay. By the way, how long about were you hoping for this to be in total?
I left an hour for it, but it doesn't have to be a whole hour if you want to drag it on, but
okay,
use as much of that as you want.
Okay, well, an hour should be a good baseline. I can, so I've spent about 20 minutes on background. I can probably spend another 20 minutes on the process used for drawing these maps, and then that'll leave another 20 minutes for question and answer or discussion, however you want to do it. So the process that I would use, and I can actually run through it to start one for the California State Legislature, so that you can experience it. And I'm also happy to go into any of the maps that I've drawn over my time doing this and talk about them a little bit too. The process that I would use is, first I'd want to know what kinds of districts I was drawing. So if we're doing the California State House, let's say, let's go with what I said before, which is 16 5-winner districts. So, well, first you need an account at Dave's Redistricting app, right? So that's easy enough to do. Like I log in through Google, like they make it pretty easy to do that. And to some extent, this will be sort of like a training in Dave's Redistricting app, but I just want to be clear that I am in no way qualified to give a training in Dave's Redistricting app in general. I've only used it to do this, and there are a lot of features that I don't use in doing this. So, and if anyone has a question about the program itself, it's like, well, can you do X or Y? There's a very solid chance my answer will be, I have no idea. But the people on Dave's Redistricting app are very responsive to questions. So, but let's go ahead and dive in and get started. So let's say I were to do California 16 by 5, meaning 16 5-winner districts. You just choose the state, 2020 precincts. Yes, this plan type is going to be for the state house. And what it automatically does is fill in the appropriate size for the state house for single winner districts. It has this box to check districts have equal population. So this one is all going to be all 5-winner districts. So they are all going to have equal population. This is an easy one. If I were doing one that was a blend of 5 and 3-winner districts, what I would do is take this number, the number of people living in a single winner district, and just multiply that by 5 to determine the target population for a 5-winner district, multiply by 3 to determine the target population for a 3-winner district, and then uncheck this box and plug in those numbers as appropriate. But since this is going to be all the same population and it's going to be even, it's easy. I just hit 16 and it does it for me. And that's it for getting started. Like you hit that and you're diving right into the state. So it's going to pull up the state for me here. And there are a few features on here that I'm going to use right away. So first of all, by default, it shows you every single precinct in California. But that is just too much data, particularly for a state as big as California. So I'm going to turn that off. turn on the background map so that I can see where the roads in towns and cities are and that sort of thing, because those are what I'm going to use in determining if I'm being reasonable in drawing particular districts. I try to follow roads or follow rivers or whatever if I can. And then I usually am also going to turn on county lines, because county lines are often the real baseline that you're going to use. And so now I've got my building blocks that I'm going to use for drawing districts. The way you're going to actually start drawing is with these tools up here, and in particular the paintbrush image there. You see by default with the paintbrush, I've got precinct selected, which means that if I click, it's going to color in a precinct. And you can just do it like this, and it's like a coloring book, right? Like it's a pretty easy process to do. You can speed it up a bit by switching to county, and then I can color in an entire county. And as I'm doing this, what you'll see on the left here is that the districts are populating. So the number of people that are not assigned to any district is going down. The number of people assigned to blue is going up. And the deviation from my target number is getting closer to 0. And my goal is going to be to get that as close to 0 as possible. Usually I'm satisfied if I can get it under 1,000. But theoretically, it would be some percentage of, the district. So now just by clicking counties, I've got it under 81,000. And you see by clicking that one, I've gone way over. So at that point, if I decided I wanted a district that looked like this, that was this long coastal district, here I would need to switch to precinct mode. And then I would just start erasing until I got closer to my target. Now, if that's taking a long time, you can actually change the brush size like that. And that way you're hitting a bunch of precincts all at once. And I would just keep doing this. I'm going to see if I can get relatively close just so that we have a sample. Okay, went too far, so I'm going to go back to the paintbrush, fill it in a little bit, and once again, you see it's sort of like a coloring book, right? And this is just an incredibly relaxing activity that I find that I always have the mental energy to do. And I'm dividing Santa Cruz. It's okay if this district doesn't actually make sense, because this is just a sample. But get it down to a reasonable population.
I see it's live updating the demographics of your district on the right side.
That's right. All right, that's close enough. I mean, it's 11,000. So this, I would not accept this, but I don't want to sit here fiddling with particular district lines for a long time. So let's say this was the first district I wanted to use. It's a 500 district. Normally I would finish before I moved on to do analysis, but I just want to show what analysis looks like. So for analysis, you just hit statistics, and this will show you a whole bunch of statistics on the district. Now it's assuming that it's a single winner district. So it's saying this is a safe blue district. That's why that's colored in blue. But of course, with proportionality, there are no safe districts, right? So that's why I had to generate this spreadsheet. And what this spreadsheet does is I paste in from the DRA statistics. So you'll see the exact same. I'm pointing at my screen as if you can see that. You'll see, population up here, and then ID, total, etc. You'll see those exact fields there. It's because I just paste them directly in. And what it will do is automatically generate something that looks like this, where it will show you exactly what the overall partisan impact will be of the whole map, as well as the partisan projection for each individual district. And then under racial analysis, it will also analyze each district by racial group. And these numbers here are the number of seats. So whatever this is, I don't even know. I think this is Virginia. This is a Virginia map. You can see that I've got one district here where Black voters are over the threshold for 1 seat on their own. Another where 3 racial groups are all really close to the threshold for 1 seat. And then the aggregate projections for racial groups just to the right of that. So it's actually a pretty cool little set of things that it generates automatically using DRA stats. So let's go ahead and paste in this district that I just made. Copy. Paste. And so here we've got 1 5-winner district, and you can see it's automatically updated to show that this district would expect to elect 4 Democrats. And then it's got a 5th seat that Republicans are over the threshold for winning, but only by a little bit, which means that Democrats could pick it up from time to time. Now you'll note this is only Democrats and Republicans. One of the goals of proportional representation is arguably to expand representation beyond a 2-party system, but we just don't have data on that, right? All the partisanship data is on the 2 major parties, or to the extent there is, like DRA has a other, how many other votes were cast in there, but honestly, that's just not trustworthy. That's not a good representation of what kind of votes third parties would get in a proportional system. So I just use this as a baseline, just saying, this area is very heavily Democratic. People who vote for Democrats would be able to control almost the whole district, and people who vote for Republicans would be able to win a seat too. That's really the right way to think of it. In a proportional system, some of those people might vote for a Working Families Party or a Green Party or independent candidates, who knows? But you do get a sense of like what the overall 2-party politics anyway are of this district from that analysis.
Drew?
Yeah.
Yeah, when I talk proportional representation to people in California, since most people are Democrats or Republicans, or they're independent, but they still vote Democrat or Republican, very few actually vote third party. I just talk about how with proportional representation, you have no orphan Democrats and no orphan Republicans. Every district will be represented by both Democrats and Republicans. And if I do get a third party person, I say, well, maybe, you might get a Green elected either maybe in a district that includes San Francisco or in West Hollywood, and maybe out in the Valley, you might get a district that elects a Libertarian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good way of doing it. When I'm on my streams or occasionally on Twitter, I'll kind of hypothesize about this. The closest I've gotten to suggesting that a third party would actually win is in talking about the very safest districts and what they might mean, particularly based on the race of the groups. Because there's this class of districts that are out there where they're very diverse. These are basically heavily urban districts that are very diverse, overwhelmingly vote for Democrats right now. And those places, I think it's a pretty like fertile place for there to be a new kind of political energy based around voters and communities of color rather than the Democratic agenda as a whole. And some of those places are in California. So just pulling up, these are the stats on the actual California map. There's a lot of places here. District 3 is a 5-winner district. White voters are only over the threshold for a single seat there.
Still, a 17% threshold is pretty high.
Yeah, 17% threshold is pretty high. And I do, whenever talking about a multi-party system under a system like the Fair Representation Act, you do have to be honest that like this isn't the German system where any party above 5% is going to be winning seats. Like this is a fairly small c conservative form of proportional representation. And I would not expect the third parties that the United States has today to necessarily be winning, possibly any seats if the system were implemented tomorrow. The Greens and Libertarians being what I think of as the largest third parties in the United States today, I don't see them getting 17% just about anywhere. But maybe that would change with dynamics. They would, at the very least, they would be able to compete on a level playing field and would be able to hold the parties accountable in a way that they, right now, just being shamed as spoilers, rarely have the opportunity to do. Yeah, so that's that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Oh, so what I just showed is how you would draw a district from scratch. But I did want to also mention the possibility of districting by combining existing districts, which can be a useful thing to do. So Dave's Redistricting app has all of the district maps that are in use in the country right now, or that are in place. And there's also a page that the folks at Dave's Redistricting app have been contributing to. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, here it is. Redistrict 2020. I'm trying to pull it into the window that I'm sharing. Maybe I'll just open it. Yeah, because I have it bookmarked, where you can analyze all of the proposed plans. So all these are various proposed plans that are coming out for the 2020 redistricting cycle, and you can open them and there'll be a link to the Dave's Redistricting app version of them, and then you can make a copy and edit them. So this is the California State House plan that's in place right now, and you just hit that paintbrush to be able to make an editing version of it. So that'll create a copy of it that you can then go in and edit. And it'll take a little while to do it. So maybe while that's loading, I can go back to my maps and pull up a prior example. I know that I have copy. Here it is. Okay, that worked. So I'll just use this. So this uses a couple other features of Dave's Redistricting app that I did not show just now. The most significant one is the ability to lock districts. So once you have a district complete and you don't want to mess with it anymore, you can lock it. And that's just, you hit this button here. And so see, I have locked the blue district, which I think is this top one here. Yeah, it is. And because I've locked it, I can now do things like, suppose I wanted to expand this red district into this county, but I only wanted it to take over the purple district. Well, now I can click there and see, because blue is locked, it doesn't change any of the part of that county that is blue. And so I can go around expanding red into purple without having to worry about disrupting blue. And the reason that's relevant to combining districts is because what you would do in order to combine districts is basically lock all of the districts and then choose the ones that you want to combine. So it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are all relatively close to each other. So let's say I want to combine those 5 districts into one. What I'm going to do is just lock all of the other districts, and maybe I'll stop after 15 or so, just so that I don't, again, I'm not wasting a bunch of time sitting here clicking over and over again. And now that I've done that, what I can do is just take blue and expand it into all of the other counties, and it will eat up all of the other districts nearby, but I won't accidentally have it fill any other districts, any districts other than those 5, because they'll all be locked. And so that can be a very quick thing to do with that feature. And I'm just going through. And you can see how it's keeping these other districts intact until I get down here and have finished with yellow, and there. So just like that, that is a 5-winner district. It'll be the right population target because it'll be 5 single winner districts, 5 existing single winner districts that I've combined into one. And you can see just how quick that is. And you would just repeat that process for all the others. And then once again, I can combine it. I can pull it from the stats there and see that northern district, or that northern and whatever, this blue district is, looks like about evenly split, 52% Democratic overall. So Democrats have a very slight edge. And you just repeat that until you have an entire district map done. And as I've been doing these, I've noticed a few patterns. So one is that almost no matter what I do, even though I will be the first to admit that in many ways I don't know what I'm doing. Like I don't know these states. I'm drawing loosely based off what geography looks like. You'll nonetheless wind up with something very much like proportional representation at the statewide level between the two major parties. The system just works really well for doing that, where if you have proportional representation within districts that elect at least 5 or at least 3, you almost always wind up with a statewide result that's really good. You almost always wind up with racial representation that's better than single winner district maps, even maps that were drawn very affirmatively to promote racial representation. And it's really very affirming for the system itself and for the rules used by the Fair Representation Act for its district magnitude rules. A lot of kind of PR purists want there to be 9 winner districts and larger. But I think I've shown that even with 3 winner districts, you do get really good representation overall. I mean, it's 25% threshold, so sometimes racial representation is a little bit worse. The most dramatic example of that was probably New Jersey, where the New Jersey is 12 seats, which would be 4 3-winner districts under the Fair Representation Act. But I showed that actually if you do 5, 4, 3, you get much better racial representation in New Jersey. So there are some times where that's the case, but even with 3-winner districts, most of the time, you get very good proportional representation. So that's about 20 minutes on the topic of how to draw these district maps. I went through it relatively quickly, but this is all stuff, if you're reasonably comfortable using computers and interface, as it seems like most people in this space are, you can pick it up really quickly. Like Dave's Redistricting app really is just a very well-designed piece of software to where I was able to open it and just start playing around and was really able to figure most of this out on my own. And now that I've created these spreadsheets and that sort of thing to help me, and I'm happy to share them with the world. In fact, I've linked to them on Twitter for anyone to use. Then this is something that's really available for anyone to do. And yeah, that's it on that. So I think the rest of it, the rest of the hour, I'm happy to spend just answering questions or chatting about this process or about the Fair Representation Act, or if we run out of that, we can talk about the latest TV shows or video games or whatever.
Well, I've got a question.
Yeah.
I've used Maptitude before, and Dave's Redistricting app seems very similar, so I don't think I'd have a problem with it. But where do you get the PR simulator spreadsheet?
So I
think
that
is yours.
Yeah, I made it, and it's already in the settings, available for anyone with the link. So I'll go ahead and copy the link, and I don't know if there's the equivalent of chat in.
There is.
Google. Yeah, I'll just post it in there. Yeah, there it is. I see it. And there you go. So you all have it now. Now you won't be able to edit it because I don't want like random a dozen people all editing it at once, right? What you can do though is open it and make a copy, and then you can use your copy to your heart's content. By the way, for ease, I usually, as soon as I put in the stats from a new map, make a copy of the PR simulator and name it with the name of the state and any other designation that I need, so that I don't mess up and paste over work that I wanted to save later on. It's just a way of saving your work. Highly recommend doing that.
Another map that I saw, I think on your Twitter account, was one where you take the districts that you've created here and combine it with this information in the simulator and make like these little bulbs in each of the districts to estimated like how many swing representatives, how many Democrats, how many Republicans based on the current data. I really like that visualization, and I was wondering if you had any. How do you produce those? Is it a manual? And if you have any side-by-side, like this is what the geographic representation of representatives would look like in multi-member districts versus the current districts.
Yeah, so that's a good flag. I mentioned I would explain the monochromatic thing, and I failed to do that. That is harder to do. I do that in GIMP, which is a open source, like Photoshop type program. And I'd be happy to share the files I have with that as well, but they're not like online, so it'd be a little bit more complicated. I have to send them to somebody, I guess. But basically, let me show you the page that I used to do the little. Well, first, in case anyone doesn't know what you're talking about, let me pull up one as an example. So I'll pull up my Twitter account, and that way it'll be easy for me to find. It's only the most recent ones. It kind of took me a while to find a format that worked really well. But okay, here we go. So here's Michigan. So people can see this is a screenshot of Dave's redistricting app, but the little circles that you see are literally just taking that screenshot into GIMP and pasting the circles on them. So I have a file that has circles arranged in 3 and in 5, and I just fill in the appropriate color. And then this rainbow map is just a tool that somebody else created. I just Googled like, how do you make one of these, and found this page, and it's pretty good. So this is intended for, this is like a tool that people use for editing Wikipedia for showing election results. That seems to be the main use for it. But you just add a party and you give them the appropriate colors. And I have the hex codes for the colors saved somewhere. And then you put in how many seats each one gets under delegates, and it automatically generates one of these rainbow charts for you. And they look really good. And that's where I got the little circles from too. I just screenshotted those and brought them into GIMP and arranged them the way that I wanted. And that's how I created this. Now, in order to make it look like that, you need to do something a little bit extra. So after drawing all your districts, there'll be all of these colors, right? There'll be the default colors that Dave's redistricting app uses. But you can go into the settings for any map, and under map settings, change the colors. And what you see is that I've changed every single district to be the exact same color. And then you need to turn off county lines, because if you have county lines on, you can't see the district lines. So you turn off county lines and turn on district lines, and that gets you this image. And this is what I'm screenshotting in order to generate that. With California, it was even more complicated, because California is such a big state that I actually then zoomed in on it and screenshotted the northern part, and then scrolled down and screenshotted the southern part, and then assembled them in GIMP. So that part is actually a little bit more complicated. If you want to do a good graphic design for what your map looks like, it does require a little bit more tools and a little bit more comfort with a more complex piece of software, which is what GIMP is. Or if you have access to Photoshop or whatever photo editing software you prefer, that's what I did it in. So that process is a little bit more complicated, but it doesn't take too long. So, if you ever if you have one that you like and you want me to do it, I could probably just do it for you. It might be faster than you learning how to do it. I wouldn't be willing to do that a lot, but I could do it once if you ever want me to.
Yeah, I thought that graph was one of the best things I saw come out of this project of yours, because it's a very great visual representation of what would be different. Mm-hmm. Especially in California, if you look at like the state assembly map or the state senate map, all of the districts on the west are Democrat, all of the districts on the east are Republican, and it's like very stark. But there are in fact Democrats in the west and Republicans in the east, and so if they actually got represented, it would look more like this. It would be great.
Right. Yeah. So here's that California map for that, and California was also complicated in that you have some extremely population dense areas, so I had to do little lines pointing to them in order to demonstrate what those would be. But you're absolutely right. Like I think it has been one of the strongest demonstrations, and this was really challenging to do. When I was at Fairvote, we would show demo multi-winner district maps, but we never did it quite like this. We usually just colored them all purple and then like had some data off to the side. And I always thought there has to be, first of all, what people were seeing were big districts. They weren't getting that there were multiple representatives in each of them. So I needed some way of showing that these are electing multiple people, and some of them are electing 3, and some of them are electing 5. And ideally, you'd be able to see that right on the map, and then showing the partisan impact too. My only trepidation with this kind of model is the like 2-party thing and competition. So one of the great benefits of proportional representation is every race is competitive. Every contest is competitive. And I really have no hesitation about saying that in a kind of absolute way. It really does tend to be the case under these systems that every race is competitive. But you wouldn't necessarily get that from looking at this map, right? There's plenty of districts on here that look like they have some blue seats and some red seats. But again, what this is actually showing is voters who generally vote for Democrats have the numbers to control 2 districts. It doesn't show 2 Democrats will win every time. The threshold being lower, participation from outside the 2-party system, competition from candidates that are from the same party would all be new sources of competition under this system. And so that's kind of the only trepidation I have here, is that sometimes people look at this and see it as a prediction for who will win, when it's really a demonstration of what kind of voter power exists in these places. But that's just too complicated to get across in a simple graphic. So I just have to remind people of that from time to time.
Probably the easiest thing to do is to wait till the Independent Redistricting Commission finishes its work, and then just lump the districts that they've drawn together to make the 5s and the 3s.
Yes, and I do plan on doing that. I've already done it for Virginia, in fact. So let me pull my series of maps back up. The Virginia proposed map, I think they've already replaced it with another proposed map, but this is 3 districts combined from the existing or the proposed single winner district map of Virginia that came out fairly recently. And those actually were the stats that were in the PR simulator when I started working on this, were the stats from that. And they're basically exactly the same as the map of Virginia that I had drawn. The map's not that different, but it still is a really helpful, especially when an egregious gerrymander comes out. Like, I should do more of that, you know. Ohio just came out, and North Carolina just came out, both absolutely egregious Republican gerrymanders. And it would be easy enough to go into one of them and combine districts and show that even if I use this incredibly flawed district map, the system still winds up with overall statewide fairness if you just combine those districts. Maybe that's what I should do next time I stream. Now that I have all the states, I've been like, what do I do on Twitch now? I want to keep doing that, but I don't exactly have anything to do. But that's probably what I should do.
Can you go back to that California map for a minute?
Oh, sure. Which California map?
The one that showed the with a little dot diagram on it.
Oh, sure. Yeah, this one.
That one, yeah. Now, what data was used to calculate the colors of the dots? Was that based on presidential vote or congressional vote or what?
So that is the short answer is it's whatever Dave's Redistricting app has. So if I can pull up, actually I've got California one here. So here's the analysis of it. All I did was paste it in this from Dave's Redistricting app. So you see it has partisan lean, it has Democrat, Republican, and other. I just ignore other and do the percent that's Democrat and Republican and make that out of 100 and assume that that's the partisanship of the data.
Do you know where he gets those percent, that lean numbers? Is that based on presidential vote, or do you not know?
Not just presidential vote. I haven't looked too deeply into his method for aggregating them into this number, but he does say that it's using lots of different elections. So it seems to be pulling together multiple elections. If it were up to me, I would just use president. I think how people vote for president is the best evidence of their partisanship, but I know that that others disagree with that.
Well, actually, no. I mean, the 2020 election was really skewed.
Yeah.
And I would actually want to use congressional votes.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Or congressional
That
data. Congressional
and what I don't think you can do with Dave's redistricting app, and I may be wrong about this, is I don't think you can tailor what source of data you're looking at there. So I don't think you would be able to find the congressional votes by novel districts that you've drawn. But again, I may be wrong about that. It isn't something I've tried yet. But I have usually used the fair vote methodology because that's sort of what I was trained on since I worked at fair vote. And fair vote just uses deviation from presidential vote deviation from the presidential national vote. So how much did Biden overperform? How much did Trump overperform in particular districts as a measure of how partisan they are? Okay, were there any other questions or anything? If
looks like for California, it looks like he uses statewide data, president, governor, attorney general.
Okay.
But he's using statewide elections, not congressional
Well, in
elections.
California, there's not a lot of good congressional data because because of the top two primary, there's a lot of congressional races that are between two Democrats or two Republicans.
Not that
Yeah.
many, but some.
Yeah, there are like 4 or 5. So
but you could use the primary data. You could use the primary data.
Maybe. Yeah, that's an interesting thought.
Yeah. Many years ago, I was trying to get the California Democratic Party to support proportional representation. And the resolutions committee asked me, well, what would this do to the congressional delegation? And so I teamed up with the Public Research Institute at San Francisco State and drew a whole bunch of different kinds of maps and used both presidential data and congressional data to simulate what the outcomes would be.
Cool. Yeah, for California itself, the message tends to be, California's districts seem to be skewed in favor of Democrats. There's reason to think that California's districts aren't asymmetrical. Like in single winner, what fairness means in single winner districts is a topic that's hotly debated. And one argument is that if they're symmetrical, then it's fine, which is to say Democrats get as much of an advantage as Republicans would if Republicans did as well as Democrats do. And that seems to be true of California's districts. Where California's single winner districts fail is on proportional representation because Democrats win a lot more seats than their proportion of the vote should earn. I tend to think that's what really matters because if 55% of the vote can elect 70% of the seats, then those votes seem to matter more, right? They seem stronger and other votes seem weaker and every vote should be equal. So that's kind of where I come down on that issue. But it would probably be a complicated sell in California because you have a supermajority party that is advantaged by the system. And so it would be difficult to convince them to give up that advantage. I think in the long run, it's better for everybody, but it's always a hard short-term sell when you're trying to get people to act against their short-term partisan interests.
Well, that's the beauty of California. We change the system all the time without consulting the legislature. We just put it on the ballot.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. I wonder if there were a law passed that simply allowed states to adopt this. Right now, federal law requires that every state elect its members of Congress in single winner districts. If California would be a state where they'd be willing to put it on the ballot. Of course, that would be unilateral disarmament, right? So it would probably lose, but for Congress. But you could do it for the state legislature, and you should,
Well, there were permissive voter choice acts introduced, a decade or two ago. Of course, they never got any hearings.
Oh, Mel Watt's bill did, the 1999.
Well, okay, right.
Yeah, that one, and it got favorable testimony from the DOJ and bipartisan co-sponsorship and everything, but still wasn't enough to pass. We talked about getting that into HR1 when it was going through, but ultimately got shut down. Groups didn't want HR1 to get caught up in that issue.
What are the prospects of FRA getting a hearing?
Not likely in this Congress. I mean, we've been so overwhelmed. I mean, what the real question, elections is dominated by what's going on with what is now the Freedom to Vote Act. And of course, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. So those bills are eating up all of the election space. And for a while, they didn't even want to introduce the Fair Representation Act until those were resolved. But ultimately decided, oh, we want to get it in every Congress, and this seems like it's going to take a long time. So let's just put it in. But they're probably not going to work it because those bills are eating up all of the election reform space. I don't know, since I don't work at Fair Vote anymore, so I'm not actually involved in promoting the Fair Representation Act on the Hill. I used to actually, visit congressional offices and stuff like that, try to get new co-sponsors. But I've been a little bit out of the loop since leaving the organization. But my guess is that they're not going to work it until, I don't know, the next Congress, whenever it is that the more straightforward election reform voting rights bills have worked, have got, for better or worse, are no longer the things being advocated for.
All right, with that, I think I'll end the meeting and the recording. Thank you very much for the talk. It was really informative for me.
Thank you.
Thanks, Drew. Thanks,
Yeah.
everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks to everyone in California.